Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our session on stocks to watch now. I'm joined by investment analyst Azharuddin, who has spent a large part of his career as head of research, leading both the equity and economic teams in several investment banks. He has also held management positions in listed corporates. Now, as the title suggests, we'll be talking about what stocks Azhar is focusing on right now, in light of Trump's tariffs and Bank Negara Malaysia's recent OPR cut. So sit back, enjoy the session. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to pop them in the comments section, bottom right hand corner of this space, or DM us directly. Right, so on Monday, Donald Trump announced a 25% tariff on all Malaysian products entering the US, effective August the 1st. The rate is 1% higher than initially proposed on April the 2nd, despite countless negotiations and the US agreeing to exempt semiconductors. Now, the reason for this, according to Trump, is to quote unquote eliminate the trade deficit disparity the US has with Malaysia. At the same time, Trump threatened Malaysia not to retaliate and said that, quote, if for any reason you decide to raise your tariffs, then whatever the number you choose to raise them by will be added on to the 25% that we charge, end quote. So Azhar, yeah, this has been a messy week, but let us backtrack a bit. What are tariffs and what do you think Trump aims to do with them?
All right. Okay. Thank you, Shinji. Hello, everyone. Good to be back here on X Space. I think the last time that we were here was in March. March we were talking about the banking sector and banking stocks. I think I will also touch a bit about banks, tonight. But first of all, let me just address what Shinji has asked. The main question: what are tariffs? Basically, tariffs are quite normal, quite normal because almost every country in the world will have tariff. Tariff is sort of like a tax. How you tax goods and products and services in order for you to sort of like protect your market lah. For example, Malaysia, we also have tariffs on automobiles, for example. For example, that the cars that you pay, the cars that you drive, right? They all invite quite a hefty amount of tariff. For example, you pay what you call excise duty, what we call import duty, sales duty. So depending whether they are completely knockdown unit or CKD, or completely built unit or CBU. If it's a CBU, if the car comes in like sebiji, right? In drivable form, you probably have to pay a higher tariff for the car, right? So the same with CKD, probably less. So I think this is quite normal because I would say almost I would say almost every country would have tariff, right? But all in all, the tariffs are done in order to protect their what we call strategic sector or strategic industry. Why we have tariff on cars, for example, which is still debatable until today, is the tariff is supposedly to protect our national cars, for example, Proton, Pro 2, right? And some people may argue, like even after 40, 50 years, we still have this tariff to protect national cars, to protect jobs, to protect the vendors, to protect the downstream activities. So it's kind of normal. So the question here is now, right? This sort of tariff that Trump and US has done is unprecedented, meaning that it's never been done before, right? That for him or for the country to impose a global wide tariff, whether you are kawan, whether you are enemy, whether they're not your friends, or whether they're your close friends, everybody kena, right? So this is the contention lah. This is your contention. So maybe we have to look from Trump point of view lah. His POV is that the world is Trump sees the world as rigged that it benefits only certain countries like China, like Japan, like Korea, like us, Malaysia, like China, smaller countries, who keep on selling goods to the United States, and they have to pay a certain price for it. And because of that, right, the country suffers what you call trade deficit, right? Trade deficit is if you buy more than what you sell, right? Simply put, if you buy more than what you sell. So of course, you know, if you look from this perspective, right, America is one of the richest nations in the world, right? And obviously, if you look at the culture, some of us have studied in the US, some of them have been to US many times. They have a culture of buying. Yeah? They like to buy stuff, right? They like to buy stuff. And of course, some of the stuff or goods that are being produced are actually American companies who are located in Malaysia, for example, who are also located in China, for example. So it's not entirely that countries like Malaysia, or countries like Thailand, or countries like Vietnam. For example, Vietnam, right? The Nike has a big manufacturing facilities over there. Who else? Gap also have over there. So these are the companies that actually relocate and produce their products in other countries so that the American people can buy and take advantage of the low cost labor. Okay, which is very common, and this has been happening for many years, many decades. But obviously, Trump is not happy with this, right? For some reason, and many people, many economists, experts are saying that he's doing this the wrong way. For us, it's fine for you to, for example, to protect things like your steel industry, for example, right? It's a strategic industry, but textile, fabrics, these strategic industries. So this is something that we have to look into, right? And a lot of people are saying that it is not. So so he thinks that this is rigged. He thinks US has become victims of all these so-called countries producing at very low cost. So what he wants to do is to bring all these factories or producers to bring back to the US and, and manufacture this in the US so that it can create job. Right? He talked about iPhone being produced in the US, right? And a lot of people are laughing about this. How much will an iPhone cost if it's to be built it to be produced in US? Some of this doesn't make sense at all. But of course, it is from his perspective, he sees that this is an opportunity for him to sort of like penalize countries that have been taking advantage of the US generosity in buying a lot of goods and products for decades before. So I think that's a preamble, Shinji, on what tariff and why is he doing this tariff.
That's very well explained. Uh, and you mentioned when the iPhone itself, right? If it were to be manufactured in the US, which by the way, guys, iPhones they are not assembled in the US. They are designed in California. Sure, you can look at your iPhone right now. It writes there design in California, but it's actually assembled in China, Vietnam, as well as India. China mostly, okay. And if iPhones were to be manufactured in the US itself, the cost would rise up to about, I think Zafrul posted a video about it recently, back in April. It's like 3,300 to 3,500 US dollars. That's insane, for iPhones to be produced in the US. And that's mainly why US companies relocate their factories to other places, right? Because it's much cheaper. And I just want to ask you a bit about this tariff thing, 25% slapped on Malaysia, Azhar. When you look at this 25% figure, right, on the surface, what impacts do you think it will have on the Malaysian economy, number one, as well as the Malaysian stock market? What do you think?
Okay. All right. Good and very tough question to look at. Because number one, right, the impact of the tariff won't be fully felt once they started imposing this in August, right? August. So far, because everybody remembers the Liberation Day on April 2nd, right? When he imposed 24% on Malaysia, 46% on Vietnam, and so forth, right? But since then, he has retract and imposed a 10% baseline, 90-day pause, right? But now, I think a couple of weeks ago, of course, we all know about the unformatted, unjustified letters that he issued to everybody, right? And he was saying that the new tariff will take effect on the 1st of August. So obviously, everybody knows that Malaysia has now been imposed a 25% tariff. Okay, so let's look at our export to US. Right, our export to US is about 11% of total export. Right, total export. So US is number three in terms of ranking. I think the first is China, second is Singapore, or is it the other way around? But anyway, these are the top three countries, right? But Malaysia has done quite well over the last, what I would say, the last 10 years to diversify our export, right, into other countries like we have now grown bigger in EU. We also grown bigger among what we call intra ASEAN. Yeah? Intra ASEAN meaning that we're now selling more products to Indonesia, to Thailand, to other countries in ASEAN. Right, so ASEAN has now become a big component of our export market. So in that 11%, about 60% of Malaysian export to US, the 11%, comprise of E&E, in electronic products, right? And in that electronic product, the big chunk is semiconductor. Okay, right. So if you look from that perspective, right, obviously there will be impact. It's quite difficult to assess the impact at the moment, right? What exports, of course, will be felt unless the US decides to say that our semiconductor tariff will stay at 10%. So at the moment, the semiconductor tariff is still being exempted from the 25% because it's still 10%. If you remember, um, Trump said that semiconductor, phones, electronics will all be imposed, will be exempted from the overall tariff, right? And this will be given a tariff of, will be imposed a tariff of 10%. But the US also said that this is probably going to be temporary while they solve the country by country tariff, right? And a lot of people are expecting that this semiconductor exemption of 10% will be given the full 25% come 1st August. Okay, that's one, yeah? That's one scenario. Okay, the other scenario is that there is still another 2 weeks before 1st of August. Okay, from what I heard is that negotiation is still ongoing. Even Vietnam, right? They have reduced Vietnam tariff, for example, from 46 to 20%. Vietnam is still negotiating with the US, right? So whether that 20% can go down to 10, obviously, Vietnam leadership is still not happy about that 20% tariff because they were hoping that it can go lower because of the Nike effect and a lot of other American companies who are there in the US. In Vietnam, right? So it's still too early to tell, but if you look at the component of the exports to US, a lot of this come from E&E, a lot of this come from semiconductor. Obviously, from what we've read from the Penang Semiconductor Association, they're saying that I don't know whether they're being dramatic or being too pessimistic. They say that we cannot survive with 25%, right? So there obviously will be impact. So the other thing about Malaysian um, electronics and technology business is that we are at the what you call at the back end where the profit margins are lower, and also we also rely on offset, which is outsourced semiconductor business. Companies like MPI, companies like Unisem, who are listed, companies like Globetronics, all rely a lot of outsourced manufacturing from the principal like Apple, Samsung, for some of them to be exported to the US. So, Sanji, it's a bit too early for me to assess, but definitely there will be an impact. Okay, so impact on economy, as I've said this before, the stock market is not really represent the economy, right? So if you look at the stock market over the last 2 weeks, ever since the Liberation Day, stock markets have made a V-shaped recovery. Okay, number one. Some of them are now at record high. For example, US is at record high, Vietnam is at record high, Singapore is at record high, India is near record high, Korea is like one of the best performing markets in Asia this year. They're up, I think, 30 to 40% something, right? So I think from investors' perspective and the stock market perspective, they are now uh, having these grabs that let's move on, right? Whether countries are hit with 25%, 20%, or 10%, companies and countries will be able to sort of like adjust and acclimatize to this tariff. The tariffs will be there. From investors' perspective, the stock market has taken a big hit in April, and also has taken a big hit since Trump came into office. But now, it seems like investors are taking this in their strides, right? Despite the letters all coming out, you can see that stocks, even Malaysian stock market, right? I mean, if you look outside of the KLCI, some stocks have performed quite well. I've seen a few stocks have also reached record high in the last 1 week. So, and sectors like commodities, plantations have all moved up as well. So we are seeing glimpses of recovery and investors returning back to the market and saying that, hey, look, if this is what it's going to be, this is what it's going to be. Let's move on, and let's deal with whatever Trump has to give to the market. So that's what I'm thinking at the moment from the reaction of the market over the last 1 or 2 months, Shinji.
So how does your personal stock list look like right now? I know this is quite a
Mm.
quite a personal question, but in light of all these tariffs as well as Bank Negara Malaysia's OPR cut, which we will talk about briefly later, are there any specific industries that you are honing in, or perhaps any specific stocks that you previously did not look at, and then now you're like, oh, okay, this is interesting. I better put this in my watch list.
Yes, there's been quite a few. I think in March when we talk about the banking sector and the risk of Trump, I did mention about several sectors. As I said, let me see. I think I put a note on what I have said before. Some of you may have taken notes. Okay, this is what I said from listening to um, the uh, at the moment I'm looking at sectors that are not externally driven, and I've always been focusing on that ever since Trump took office. For example, I'm into more consumer staples sector, and also I'm also in defensive. You'll be surprised that I'm looking also at plantation stocks and commodity stocks. For example, like those who are giving high dividend yield. So these are some of the sectors I'm looking at. And I think the most important thing is that when you want to create the stock list or monitor stocks, I'm always advocating that you focus on the sectors that you know best. For me, like when you introduced me just now, that I've been working in the banking sector for a very long time. Uh, Always that I will always look at banks first, right? Because this is a sector that I'm very 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 familiar with, right? And I've worked in banks for more than 20 or 30 years, right? And bank will always come back. Banks have high capital. They're looking to return capital to shareholders. They've been doing that for the last few years, so they are quite resilient, right? Especially the larger banks like Maybank, like RHB, like public bank. So they're quite resilient. So these are some of the sectors I'm looking at. Also, I'm quite familiar with, I've worked in the transport logistics sector before. I'm quite familiar with that. So I try to put this in also in my watch list, especially if some of you have followed Westports, right? Westports for like I think for years and years they've been trading around 4 ringgit, 3 ringgit plus 4 ringgit. But I think ever since this actually they're one of the largest beneficiaries of this tariff war. The volume at Port Klang has increased. They also got a tariff hike recently, and the share price now is almost 6 ringgit, right? So this is something that I also have in my watch list. That's something that will benefit from tariff. Not every. This is something that we have to bear in mind, right? Whenever there is a crisis, whenever there is a slowdown in economy, whenever there is a what we call event, black swan event, right? So what are the black swan event that's happening for the last 6 months? And if you stretch it back until the last 3 or 4 years, we had COVID, we had supply chain shock, we had a surge in inflation. Remember, when inflation in the US went to 9%, and our inflation also rose to 4%, which is quite unheard of. We have the fastest US hikes ever in history, right? From almost 0% to 5.5% in the space of 1 year. That has never happened before. We have this tariff war issue. We have Trump as president. We have the US bombing Iran for the first time, I think, in 40, 50 years, right? But the stock markets always come back, right? This is what is happening now, right? The black swan events that have happened over the last 4 to 5 years, right? And even as recently as this year, stocks, companies will always find a way to adjust, will always find a way to adapt, and always find a way to improve their profitability. So hence, or not, even in the worst case scenario, they improve their dividend. Right? If they've got nothing else to do with the money, for example, if they can't reinvest, they're sitting a lot of cash, they will distribute that to shareholders, in the form of dividend. So I'm happy with that, right? So I have also, when I do my stock list, okay, I look at the sectors that I'm familiar with. For number one, I look at sectors that won't be affected by all this tariff war and volatility. Number three, I look at the sectors that would also, in a way, indirectly benefit. So I have this company called KGB. Some of you may be familiar, or called Kellington Berhad. They're now at record high because they're in the service of supplying gas and servicing semiconductor companies like the China ones. So I've been holding on to this stock for, I don't know, for the last 2 or 3 years, right? And it has been giving me quite good returns over the last few years, right? And of course, when you buy the stock, when you see profit accumulating, it's always tempting for you to take profit. But if you're in the long run, you always want to look at the intrinsic value of these companies. These are some of the stocks. One stock that I always like to highlight in my posting is a company called Spreezer. Of course, everybody knows Spreezer, right? I love this stock very, very much. I'm not recommending or anything, right? I own this stock. I bought it maybe about one year ago or 2 years ago, right? And you see that this stock, the Malaysian have this affinity for Spritzer for whatsoever reason, I do not know, right? But I think maybe because Spritzer has marketed themselves as a premium brand, from a normal brand to a premium brand, they have elevated themselves to a premium brand, and you can actually see that in their results for the last 2 years. Has been outstanding, especially since they opened up after COVID in 2022, right? The sales have shot through the roof, right? And they started giving quite good dividend. I think the last 1 year the last quarter they give 4 or 5 cent dividend. So these are the stocks that you want to stay in the long term, Shinji, that you it's not affected. People are spending, right? And Malaysian people are I can see that Malaysian people are improving their quality of life when they have that in mind. Of course, when you buy mineral water, right? You want to buy what you perceive as the best. And number one, number two, there's also now the more affection towards local companies. I notice that this younger generation in Malaysia now, right? It's easy for companies, for local companies, to market themselves to the current generation compared to, I'm much older, right? For us before, right? Because number one, there is not many local companies. When I grew up, when I started working 20, 30 years ago, right? There are not that many Malaysian companies, local companies. So you are always associated with, the big companies like Nestle lah, like Coca-Cola lah, like, all these foreign companies, right? But over the last 10, 20 years, we have seen many local companies that have done very well, right? I mean, in retail, you have the 99 Speed Mart. In retail, you have Mr. DIY, which they never existed before, right? Dulu, if you want to go, you have to go to the foreign brands lah to come here, right? But now you see that all these things are actually the market for local companies, domestic companies have now grown by leaps and bounds, right? You have local companies actually competing with Nestle, and people are happy to downtrade. I wouldn't call this downtrade. They're happy because they now have alternative, right? If you want to buy ice cream, if you want to buy milk, you can now buy Farm Fresh instead of buying Dust Lady or instead of buying Nestle brand, right? So there are a lot of alternatives. There are a lot of substitutes, I would say. And also, like I said just now, the current generation is much more open to domestic. Macam zaman dulu kalau I remember, if you buy local macam tak kelas lah, tak kelas, tak berapa ni, tak berapa hebat. You want to buy imported goods, But now I notice that because number one, the local companies have elevated themselves, right? That's why, when you talk about Spritzer, you call this the Malaysian punya apa tu, the French water. It's like it's almost equivalent to French mineral water or Italian mineral water, right? So this is the what is happening in the country at the moment. So you have many choices. You have many stocks. You have many companies that are domestically driven that can serve the local we Malaysian. Yeah. So these are some of the. I don't want to give too much, because I think I know I can talk about how to build a stock list and watch list for the whole night, Shinji.
Yeah, the stock list one, that one will be presented by you during our upcoming event on the 26th of July, lah, which, if you guys don't know, I pinned it up on this space over here. So we will see Azhar again on 26th July in a physical event. Okay, he has agreed to conduct a session for about 60 to 70 people, right? Specifically talking about how to pick stocks, right? You create your own stock list, analyze companies, understand the balance sheet and whatsoever. If you want to learn more, you can click on that link that I attached in this pin space over here, and you guys can figure out how to sign up. Okay, so yeah, a lot of stocks you mentioned just now. Espresso is the most interesting one, but I do want to hone in on the banking sector, because that is your forte. Malaysian banks, they are known to pay solid and very consistent dividends. In fact, Maybank itself, I'm sure some of the audience people know here, they have paid 5 to 7% dividends every year for the past decade, regardless of how the broader market performed. Even during the COVID pandemic, their dividends they've maintained very solid, above 5%. Now, I think let's zoom in. Let's zoom in on Maybank first, okay? I personally don't think that it will be that much affected by Trump's tariffs. I may be wrong because it's mostly serving Malaysian customers. How do you think the banking industry will move forward? Specifically, if we were to focus on the largest bank in Malaysia, let's say Maybank.
Okay. Again, another good question on the bank. Okay. How do we value bank and how do we look at banks, right? Okay. There are several top line data that we can look at, top line numbers. Of course, the most important one is how bank grows their loans or financing lah, you know. Because the bread and butter of banks are actually two. It's quite easy. Number one, you get as much as deposit as you can, the lowest deposit as you can, right? The lowest deposit are the what you call CASA or current account savings account, right? Because this pays very little, you know. If you have a current account, you know, some current account are paying zero or 0.25%, right? If you have a savings account, probably pay about 1% or 2%, and FD probably in the region of 3.75. Now with Negara cutting down interest rate by 0.25, of course you will see the new FD that will be offered will be lowered by 25 basis points, right? And for some who have locked in earlier, you only see the adjustment after maturity. Okay, that's on the cost of fund, what you call the cost of fund. So how much is your cost that you bring in? And after that, of course, the selling part. The selling part is the amount of financing or loans that you give out to your customers, right? And for Malaysia, the the growth of financing or the growth of loan over the last few years have been in the region of 5 to 6% per year. Okay. And some banks have grown more than that, right? And some banks have grown that. So I think this is the most important thing to look at. You know, if you look at Maybank, so where do you see Maybank growing their loans and by how much, right? Because we all know Maybank has been very conservative. They have businesses in Singapore, in Indonesia, in what in most of the ASEAN countries, right? But their largest market is Malaysia. The second largest market is Singapore, and the third largest market is Indonesia. So, Singapore accounts for a big chunk of their profit. I don't remember exactly, but I think it's about 20 or a quarter of their profits come from Singapore, and they have done quite well in the wealth management business and private banking business in Singapore. Okay, right. Maybank is the first listed company in Malaysia to achieve a net profit of 10 billion ringgit. Okay, nobody has ever done that before, as far as I know, right? As far as my record shows, nobody has done before. Of course, the largest company in Malaysia is we all know is Petronas, right? They make more than 100 billion, but they're not listed. Okay, so Maybank is by far the largest company that in terms of net profit, right? They do about 2.5, 2.6 billion, billion per quarter. So if you sum that up, it becomes 10 half billion. Yeah. So the question here is that, will they be affected by tariff? I wouldn't say they would not be affected, but it's just the degree of impact that they would have. That is something that, as I said earlier on, is quite difficult to ascertain at the moment, right? We all understand that the GDP has been going through a bit of moderation, but nothing to worry about. In the first quarter, we had GDP growth of 4.4% versus the fourth quarter about 5%, right? Second quarter GDP advanced numbers will be released by DOS on Friday, on the 18th. I think 18th is on Friday. So we will be able to delve in or dive into what's the forecast like for second quarter, right? I think a lot of people will be looking at this number because it includes the preliminary figures for the second quarter and a peek into the third quarter, which to me, I think it's hard for us to forecast at the moment, right? Because of the tariff uncertainty, even I spoken to Bank Negara the other day, they say that, we're on solid footing. The reason why the Bank Negara decide to cut 25 basis point, it is not, I have to correct a lot of people on this. It's not because we are going into a recession, Bank Negara is taking a preemptive move If you remember the US, when they cut interest rate by 50 basis point, I think it was in August of last year or September of last year. It was also in the same wavelength with Malaysia, you know. They also did that because of preemptive move, you know, that number one, inflation has come down. Number two, they want to ensure that, you know, that the labor market does not deteriorate or anything, right? So they're taking a preemptive move, and they did two cuts for that. You know? But remember that US did two cuts because, as I alluded to earlier, right, they increased the interest rate at the highest speed ever in history. So they have to sort of like readjust their interest rate. For us in Malaysia, right, our rates, I would say it's at normal normal rate. 3% is at normal rate. Why I say it's at normal? Because it's what Bank Negara calls it's good enough, or it's a commodity for growth, and it's a commodity for inflation. So there are two things normally central banks are worried about, are concerned about. Plus the other one, plus the other one is of course currency. Number one is growth. Number two is inflation. You know, they don't want inflation to run away. We've had issues with inflation before the last few years with supply shocks, but now inflation is sort of like contained. Core inflation is also the first 5 months about 1.9%. Headline inflation is about 1.4%. So there is um, no worry on that front lah, right? So the concern is here is that what Ben Negara is saying is that there is greater uncertainty in terms of the tariff, right? So, but I think once everybody starts to adjust to the tariff, right, growth will come back slowly, right? Growth will gradually come back. And the good thing about Malaysia is that 60% of our GDP is made up from services sector, which is basically domestic oriented. Yeah, I mean, you and I spending, you got tourists coming here to spend, we go to cafes and spend, we buy houses, we buy a lot of things, right? So those are all in the service sector. So I think Maybank, back to Maybank, being the largest, you know, when when there is uncertainty like this, right, it's always good to stick with what's the biggest and what's the best, right? I think we all can say here, you know, Maybank is probably, in terms of, you know, I spoke about the net profit, the ability to derive profit from the regional market, regional economies, among the best, among all the other banks in Malaysia. And they are by far the largest bank in the country. So I do think that they should not be affected that much, number one. Number two, you know, Maybank has this policy of paying about 60 or 70% of their profit as dividends, right? And Malaysian banks are what I call is quite well capitalized, right? Well capitalized, meaning that they have a lot of capital, a lot of capital. So this capital can easily be given back to shareholders, as what Maybank has done. I think they paid 61 cent in terms of dividend. A lot of analysts are forecasting that they will be probably giving 62 or 63 cent. So if you calculate that to the price, I think they are yielding about 6.5%, if I'm not mistaken. Right. So still, this is still a lucrative and attractive dividend yield for Maybank if you are a shareholder of Maybank, right? So disclaimer, I'm not a shareholder of Maybank at the moment. I used to be, but not anymore, because I moved the capital somewhere else for higher dividend, right? So for your information, I normally allocate probably about quarter of my portfolio for dividend stocks, right? Because sometimes dividend stocks ni kan, dia ada trade off, no? Trade off. If you focus too much on dividend, that stock won't give you capital gains, right? So you have to macam, you know, you have to decide which one you want. Do you want capital gains or you want dividends? So if you're happy to have dividends of 6 to 7% per year, then banking stocks are for you, and some of the plantation stocks are for you. Okay, but I wouldn't advise for you to put so much money into dividend stock, because if you put so much money, let's say half your portfolio in dividend stocks, chances are, right, you won't have that capital gains, right? Because usually, we know that companies that are in growth space, growth era, they will need the money, the cash flow, to fund for their operations. And as a result of that, they won't be able to pay high dividend as companies that are stable in nature, for example, right? So they will need that money lah. Macam kita lah, muda-muda kan. Muda-muda we need money to buy house, to buy car, to buy a lot of things. We won't be able to save much lah, for example, right? And we won't be able to give a lot to our parents. Macam tu lah kan. Our parents are among our shareholders or stakeholders. But as we grow older, our salary go higher, and as our commitment also, presumably our commitment stays the same, we're able to have more excess money, to give to charity or whatever lah. Alright. So the same concept that you have with banks and a lot of other companies lah. Okay, Shinji. So I hope I didn't ramble too long on that one.
Not at all, not at all. I enjoy listening to you talk. Like, it's a fantastic example that you provided, like parents and children. Parents are our shareholders. Or is it the other way around? We are our parents' shareholders.
It depends what stage of life lah. Some people couldn't win off their parents and the shareholders. They become the shareholder of their parents. Right.
That's nice. That's a good one. That's a good one. But yeah,
Mhm.
I think it really explains a lot about the banking sector, and what I got the most out of you is that the resilience lah of Malaysia's banking sector. And sure, it will be impacted by Trump's tariffs, but because of the stability of the sector itself, particularly the large banks, mostly Maybank, right, we are not really expecting too much of an impact of Trump's tariffs on these respective banks lah. Now, the next question is, let's say there's this beginner over here, not necessarily a beginner as well. Maybe this person has invested in stocks for like a couple of years, 2, 3 years, right? If there's one very important thing that you would tell them, what would it be?
You mean it's a beginner who's just started 3 years in holding stock, right?
Yeah, sure. I mean,
Again, can
or,
you reframe that
or,
question again?
or,
Sorry.
or we can break it into two parts lah. One is, let's say
Uh,
uh, that this person hasn't really started investing in stocks yet, wants to start. Okay, so what's the very important thing that you will tell them? And the second one is, let's say this person has already started investing in stocks, started investing in the own markets or whatsoever, whether US, Malaysia, right? What's another important thing that you will tell current investors? So basically two questions.
okay, all right. The first one is quite easy. Attend our class on the 26th. Okay, just kidding. But if you haven't started investing, right? If you plan to invest in the stock market, of course, there's nothing but there's not. I mean, the first and foremost you have to do is, of course, to learn what investment is all about. Because as I said, there are a lot of asset classes, right? So you ask to yourself, right? Why do I want to invest in stocks? Can I take the risk? Can I take the volatility? Right? Why can't I instead, go invest in businesses directly? Why do I invest in stocks? Right? Why don't I invest in property? Right? It's also an investment asset class as well. Why don't I invest in Bitcoin? Why don't I invest in what bonds or whatever? For me, choosing the stock market is very easy. Okay, number one, I've worked in stock market for decades, right? And number two, stock market has been proven. You can talk about anything, right? The stock market has proven over the last 100 plus years. If you look at US stocks, they have been proven to give you return after return. They always come back, as I said just now, right? In spite of in fact, I love stock market crash. I love stock market crash so much because that is the time that I can just buy. The only thing I hate about stock market crash is that there's so many things to buy. Right? And in the end, you don't know which one to choose. right? So whenever there is a big correction, really like a big discount lah, no? So a lot of us, bila kita masuk kedai, you always look for discount, look for 20%, look for 10%, whatever, right? Tapi bila when the stock markets come down, 20%, you all panic. Okay, so that's one. So I think is when the market goes up by 20%, I think the stock market is very unique in a way that when it comes down by 20%, orang takut. When it goes up by 20%, we want to buy. So it's unique in that way, right? So I think the most important thing, if you're a beginner, right, you have to learn to understand what stock market is all about. What is stock? How does it how is it different? How is it different from companies? Right? Are you buying stocks? Are you buying companies? Right? For example, if you look at stock, you have to understand what the intrinsic value is. Some people that I've talked to, they want to invest in stock. When I say that, what you look at, do you look at dividends? For example, say what's and then they ask me, what's dividend? Kan? Dividend ni bukan ASB saja ke bagi? Listed company pun bagi dividend ke? So they don't know this thing, right? So these are very basic fundamentals that people do not know. You'll be surprised, right? You'll be surprised, Shinji. There are a lot of people who talk about stocks, they do not know the mechanics or dynamics of the stock market or stocks itself, right? They don't know that companies pay dividend. There are companies that pay dividend twice a year, 4 times a year. I have one company that I can say that I own lah. I love this company called Price Plantation. You know why? Because they pay four times dividend a year, right? So every 3 months I get dividends from them, right? And they pay quite well dividend, and the yield that they're giving me based on my cost is 8%, right? So why do I have to worry about ASB when this company can give me 8%, right? Why do I have to worry about EPF when this company can give me 8%? So this is one example. So learn, study, and you have to really understand the dynamics, how it works. Okay. So that's number one, right? Number two, if you are already an investor, right? Again, it's all about fundamentals. It's all about fundamentals. If you're a trader, that's different. I'm the one who advocate that you buy stocks for the long term. In fact, I try not to sell stock. But of course, we being human beings, we all have mental stress, emotional distress. When the market, it's easy for me to say right now, 20% jatuh, belilah, kan? Tapi when it really happened to us, right? Saya pun takut juga lah nak beli, kan? Right? Takut sometimes when your stocks fall 10%, right? Then you start to panic. You say, kenapa jatuh ah? What, I'm sure some of you who have been holding stock for 3 years will feel the same thing. Why my stock jatuh ah? What happened ah? Is there something happening? And then you heard rumors lah. You heard rumors macam-macam, and you decide to sell. Okay, you follow the herd. When you follow the herd, then tomorrow the stock recover. Yeah, you be kicking your butt for that, right? So I think this is but once you are in the market, once you have conviction on that particular stock, right? You have to stay and stick to that thesis until the thesis is broken, right? Or I have you talk about thermodynamics and all that thing lah. This is different lah. That one is fraud, right? That one's fraud is different. This is broken. It means that the company couldn't grow anymore. You bought it because it's in a growth sector. It's supposed to give you 10-20% EPS growth, but somehow competition comes in. A new competitor comes in that you couldn't foresee coming in. Then the thesis is broken. They couldn't grow anymore. In fact, the growth becomes negative. I give you a classic example. Classic example of Nestle, right? Nestle Malaysia. They used to make about 200 million per quarter, but last year the net profit actually came down to below 100 million per quarter, right? And they have struggled since. Two reasons why they struggle, right? Number one, the increase in cost and in cost, right? In cost, the margins have, in fact, you already see the yellow flag lah in Nestle. I think back in 23, I think. If I'm not mistaken, back in 23, in the early quarter of 23, you can see the yellow flag coming in because the margin started to compress and the quarterly earnings started to reduce. So that's yellow flag. Okay, and then you start seeing the next 1 or 2 quarters, right? The next 1 or 2 quarters, you still see that the margins couldn't recover, right? And now talks about, people want to boycott lah. Then after that, after boycott, then people start to downtrade, and then people start buying farm fresh food, farm fresh punya milk, right? And people start buying, for example, if you buy biscuits, contoh kan, there's a big Johor based company called Munchies, can you all know? And it's done very, very well. All right. In fact, Munchies, I think, are now owned partly by a foreign company as well, a big foreign F&B company. So they have now penetrated into Nestle's market. So you can see this happening. So when you look at all these things, right, the yellow flags that you're seeing, you even though you feel that you are a seasoned investor, sometimes, when you look at companies, you have to understand that whether the moat of the companies, are big enough for them to be able to protect their turf, right? Of course, we all know about Berjaya and Starbucks, right? Berjaya and Starbucks keep on saying that, I think they're in denial, right? They're in denial. They still say that the main reason why they are struggling is because of the boycott, right? Actually, we consumers, we know lah kan, it's not about the boycott. The boycott sudah lepas, right? Sudah habis. The boycott, I think we have gone past the boycott phase. Hey Starbucks Malaysia, please try and understand, we have now Zeus, we have Gigi, we have Riquiamo, we have so many coffee chains which are conveniently located, grab and go, at lower price, at much better coffee taste, right? Please, please consider all these factors, right? And I've written about this many times in my post, and also presented about this, as example, in places that I do presentation, right? So, even if you are 3 years, so look at whether the thesis been broken or not, right? And of course, the Shinji mentioned about resilience, right? It's easy for me here to say, you have to be resilient, you have, but when sometimes when shit hit the fan, right, you pun panic, like macam, who didn't panic during Liberation Day? Raise their hands. I didn't, right? I didn't panic. So I think a lot of people panic during Liberation Day because they will say that, okay, this is Armageddon, this is the end of the world, and everybody will go into recession. But the stock market, rebounded and rebounded very well. Look at Nvidia now, right? And if you remember that, few months back, they're saying that Google had a big data breach. Stock fell down by 6%. It's higher. It's higher now than it was during that time. So, don't follow hurt. Follow your conviction, and of course, follow what your heart tells you. Right? A bit philosophical, right?
Yeah, I think there was also at one point of time last year, was it last year or this year? Probably this year lah. As this Chinese AI attempting to take over ChatGPT spread quite a lot of panic in the US market lah. Caused tech stocks in the US to drop quite a bit also. But now, like what you mentioned, it has recovered back to its all-time highs. Nvidia recently has also touched an all-time high, which speaks a lot about your personal philosophies, right? Once you have like a thesis, you stick to it, right? Until, like what you said, that thesis is broken. So now we have a question from our patron. It says, if I have 250 ringgit spare cash monthly, is it better to allocate into index funds, allocate into individual US stocks, or save up for better opportunities soon? What do you think, Azhar?
Okay. There are many ways to answer this question, right? Uh, it depends on it depends on how much time you have, how much effort you want to put in, and how much you know about stocks and how much you're willing to go into individual stocks. If you have a good knowledge on, I'm not saying one is better than the other, right? Of course, I also buy ETF. I buy index fund. My best performing ETF is, I love talking about silver. Right, that's my best performing ETF, silver. I also have China ETF, which so lah, not doing so well. Um, but I also have individual stocks. I buy in the US. I own a bit of Google. I own a bit of Cloudflare, Cloudflare, which is giving me quite good return. So it depends whether you have that time or not. If you have specific stocks in the US, for example, that you know that, okay, I know this stock very well. I can dedicate a lot of time for this particular stock. I know the thesis. I know it's in the right sector. By all means, buy the stock, right? Because stocks have been proven to perform better than index fund and ETF, right? But if you don't have that time to go through all this, then index fund will probably be for you, right? And find an index fund or ETF that best suits your goal, your goal or your understanding. Okay, whether you should buy or hold now, I think to me, investing is always better, the best if you start today, right? If you say that you're having 250 extra, starts today. You have another extra tomorrow, buy again tomorrow. You have another extra next month, buy next month. Investing is always this habit of, you know, you have to invest regularly to be able to get that good return. Not only when you kata, dah belanja, kebetulan ini ada duit lebih, baru beli. No, you have to allocate first for investment, for savings. First, allocate for savings, and after that, you have the balance, allocate for investment. Of course, the savings, you allocate because you want to build enough savings for you to invest later on. But since you say that you have this 250 maybe a month or a week, so start investing today, whatever you're comfortable with. Right? Don't wait. Okay?
Exactly. Yeah, so for those of you guys who have previously were a bit reluctant to dip your toes into the water, I think hopefully after this session, considering everything we talked about just now, not so sure whether you guys have created your own stock list or not based on what Azhar has said, but hopefully you have gained enough knowledge to push yourself to start regardless of what the current state of the market is. It's more important to invest now than delay, and then you continue to miss the opportunity. Because if you look at markets over the long run, like what Azhar has mentioned, and this is a super important point, which I really agree with, no matter what happens, no matter what black swan event or whatsoever, markets have proven to always recover. And when they crash, that is another good opportunity for you to buy it at a discount. So I will hand the last words of the session over to Azhar, as per our tradition, every time when we do sessions like this. So over to you, Azhar. Any last words to the audience that are here today or that are still listening currently?
Yeah. For me, it's, investment, whether you are in the stock market in whatever kind of investment, is always the best form of you to gain better returns, right? Because a lot of people are saying that put money in over here or put money over there. At the end of the day, right? Is 5% enough for you or 6% enough for you? Is 4% enough for you? For me, if I want to grow my money, 5% is not enough, 6% is not enough, right? I want to see my money grow 10% per annum at the minimum, right? Over a period of time now on average, right? So this is how you generate wealth, you generate passive income from dividends. So all this will work well for you if you start investing today and start to allocate, a bit of money every month for you to buy, right? I would not recommend, I'm not advocating here, certain stock or anything, but investing as a whole. And for me, there's nothing better than the stock market, because it gives me the opportunities to buy the best companies in the world. For example, only the stock market can give you access to the best companies in the world, like Nvidia, like Apple, like Google, like Spreezer in Malaysia. Only the stock market can give you that. And you be proud owner of a bit of that business that can grow over the long term, and you can be part of the growth. So that's the beauty for me about being in the stock market and being a stock investor. That's my last word.
Thanks so much, Azhar, for today's session. It's been really insightful. And for those people here, if you guys learned something, if you haven't followed Azhar yet, I think it only takes about 2 or 3 seconds. Tap on his profile, tap on follow. He regularly shares a lot of insightful stuff, not only about the Malaysian stock market, right, but about global markets. If you want to see Azhar again, he will be presenting in our physical event. Actually, he's the main speaker of the event itself on the 26th of July. Okay, so click on our bio, or perhaps you can click on Azhar's bio. We have a pin post over there. It's Stock Picking for Dummies. That's a 4-hour crash course, physical event, which Azhar will guide you on how to read financial statements, how to pick stocks like analysts, and you can actually leave with your own stock list. Okay, so we currently have about, I think, 8 or 10 more spots remaining only. So sign-ups are running out fast. If you're interested, go and check it out. All right, thank you guys so much for joining tonight. I will see you guys in the next session. Stay safe. Hey, thanks again, Azhar. Bye. Good night.
Thank you. Bye.